The boy at the back of the class. There used to be an empty chair at the back of my classroom. It wasn't a special chair, it was just empty, because there was no one sitting in it. But then, one day, just 3 weeks after school started, the most exciting thing that could ever happen to anyone happened to me and my 3 best friends. And it all began with that chair. Usually, the best thing about starting a brand new term is that you get extra pocket money to buy new stationery with. Every year, on the last Sunday of the summer holidays, my mum takes me on an extra special adventure to hunt down my stationery set for the new school year. Sometimes I get so excited that my feet feel jumpy inside and I don't know which shop I want to go into first. There aren't many nice stationery shops where I live. They only ever have boring dinosaur sets for boys or princesses sets for girls. So Mum takes me on the bus and train into the city, where there are whole streets of shops, even huge department stores that look like tall blocks of flats from the outside. Last year, I found a space-themed set with pictures of an astronaut floating past the moon. It was on sale too, so I bought a pencil case, a maths set, rubbers and a long ruler, and still had nearly £1 left over. The ruler is one of my favourite stationery pieces because the astronaut floats across it in water mixed with silver stars. I played with it so much that the astronaut got stuck to one side and couldn't be bothered to move again. But it wasn't my fault. Mr. Thompson, our teacher last year, had such a boring voice that my hands needed something to do. That's why it's important to have fun stationery with you in class, because you never know what you'll need to stop your brain from falling asleep or doing something that might get you into detention. This year, I bought a Tintin and Snowy set. I love Tintin. Even though he's only a character in a comic book and isn't real, I want to be just like him when I grow up. I think being a reporter and getting to solve mysteries and go on adventures must be the best job in the world. My mum and dad used to buy me a brand new Tintin comic book for my birthdays, and Mum saves all the comics her library are about to throw away because they're too old or ripped and gives to me, so I have a whole collection of them now. I've read them all at least 50 times, but I'll have to think of another pet to travel with because I'm allergic to dogs. I don't think cats or hamsters or even trained mice could be half as useful as a Tintin's dog, Snowy. And even though I've thought about it for at least a year now, I still haven't come up with anything. Because the Tintin stationery set was a lot more expensive than the astronaut one and wasn't on sale, I could only buy a pencil case, a small ruler and 2 rubbers. I had to think about it for a very long time, but in the end I decided spending all my pocket money in one go was worth it. Not just because everything had Tintin on it, but because if you press a button on the pencil case, Snowy barks and Captain Haddock's voice cries out, "Blistering barnacles!" I've already been told off for pressing it in the middle of maths class this year, but if you can't press a barking dog button in maths, then I don't see the point of it. I don't like maths. Simple maths is fine, but this year we're learning about long division and square numbers and all sorts of things my brain doesn't like doing. Sometimes I ask for help, but it's embarrassing putting your hand up too many times to ask the same question. I'm lucky because Tom and Josie and Michael always help me with the things I get stuck with. They're my best friends and we do everything together. Tom's got short spiky hair and a side smile and a big Adam's apple that looks like a ping pong ball that got stuck in his throat. He's the smallest in our group, but he's also the funniest. He only joined our class last year after his parents moved here from America, but we became friends instantly. He has 3 older brothers who all tease and bully him. Not seriously, only for a joke. But I think they steal his food too, which is why he's so skinny and always super hungry. I once saw him eat a whole pizza with extra toppings and a double cheeseburger for lunch and still not be full up. So I hide my snacks and chocolate bars from him where I can. Josie has large brown eyes and at least 1,000,000 freckles across her face. She's tall and gangly and is always chewing on her hair. She's the fastest girl in our year and can kick a football past any goalie from the other side of the pitch. She's the coolest person I know, and I've known her since we were 3. Our mums say we became instant friends the first day we started nursery, so they decided to become friends too. I don't really remember much about myself at that age, but Josie is in all my school memories. We even got our first detention together last year, all because of a hamster called Herbert. Josie had heard one of the upper school bullies say that he was going to flush our class hamster, Herbert, down the toilet at home time. Josie told me, and we decided to go on a hamster rescue mission. We hid Herbert in my rucksack before home time and took him straight to my house. But of course, Mum found out and made me take him back the very next day. I tried to explain to boring Mr. Thompson what had happened, but he wouldn't listen and gave me detention. And even though she didn't have to, Josie stood up and said she'd help me to steal Herbert too, just so we could do a detention together. You know a friend's a best friend when they're willing to sit in a detention with you. Michael has the neatest, puffiest afro out of all the boys in our year. Most people think he's weird, but not us. His glasses are always broken and his shoelaces are never done right, so he's always tripping up or bumping into things when he walks. But we're all so used to it that we never notice. He's mostly quiet, but when he says something, grown-ups usually look impressed and say it's ingenious or insightful, or use other strange word beginning with in. I don't know what they mean, but I guess they mean he's clever. Grown-ups always like coming up with long words for simple things. Michael gets made fun of a lot because he can't run fast or kick a ball in a straight line, but he doesn't care. I wouldn't care either if I was as rich as him. His dad is a professor and his mum is a lawyer, and they're always busy. They buy him all the latest gadgets and books and the coolest new games. When we went to his house last year for his birthday party, we saw his room for the first time. It looked like the inside of a toy store. I think it must be easier not to care about what people think when you've got that many toys in your life. Josie and Michael are always competing with each other to see who can get the most gold stars and A's in class. Michael is the best at history and Josie is the best at maths. But I'm better at reading and spelling than both of them, especially Josie. She hates reading and never ever reads anything outside class. She says she doesn't have an imagination, so there's no point to reading books. I find that strange, because how can anyone not have an imagination? I think she must have had one when she was younger, but that it was knocked out of her when she fell off her bike last summer. Mum says people without imaginations are dead inside. I don't think Josie is dead anywhere. She talks too much. Having three best friends can make a school seem like the best place to be, even on the most boring day. Although this year, school has become a whole lot more fun, and that's because of our new teacher, Mrs. Khan. Mrs. Khan has extra bouncy hair and always smells of strawberry jam, which is much better than smelling of old socks like Mr. Thompson used to do. She's new to the school and extra clever, much cleverer than Mr. Thompson ever was. And she gives us prizes on Fridays when we've all been good. No other teacher in our year does that. Mrs. Khan lets us do all sorts of interesting things that we have never done before. In our first week of school, she helped us make musical instruments out of things we found in the school's recycling bin. And in the second week, she brought in a brand new comic book to read to us that wasn't even in the school library yet. Then, in the third week, something happened that was so surprising and made everyone so curious that even Mrs. Khan couldn't make us focus on our lessons properly. And it all began with the empty chair. It was on the third Thursday after school had started, and Mrs. Khan was taking the register. She was just about to call my name when there was a loud knock at the door. Usually, when there's a knock on the door, it's just someone from another class bringing a note, so no one really pays any attention. But this time, it was Mrs. Sanders, the head. Mrs. Sanders always wears her hair in exactly the same way and peers over her glasses whenever she talks to anyone. Everyone is scared of her because when she gives detention, she doesn't just make you sit in a room. She makes you memorize long words from the dictionary and doesn't let you leave until you've learnt them off by heart. The meaning and the spelling. I've even heard of lower graders being stuck in detention for hours because they had to learn words that were as long as this page. So when we saw that it was Mrs. Sanders at the door, we all fell silent. She looked very serious as she walked up to Mrs. Khan, and we all wondered who was in trouble. After she had whispered and nodded for a few seconds, she suddenly turned round and, peering over her glasses, pointed to the empty chair at the back of the class. All of us turned around to have a look at the empty chair. This was the chair. As I said, it was a pretty ordinary chair, and it was empty because a girl called Dina left our class at the end of last year to move to Wales. No one really missed her except for her best friend Clarissa. Dina had been a bit of a show-off and was always talking about how many presents her parents got her every week, and how many pairs of trainers she had, and all sorts of other things that no one else cared about. She liked to sit at the back of the class because then she and Clarissa could pretend to be doing lessons when really they were drawing pictures of their favourite pop stars and giggling about someone they didn't like. Someone else could have taken the seat, but no one really wanted to sit next to Clarissa. That's why the chair had stayed empty. After whispering for a few more seconds with Mrs. Khan, Mrs. Sanders left the classroom. We expected Mrs. Khan to say something, but she seemed to be waiting, so we waited too. It was all very serious and exciting. But before we could start guessing about what was going on, Mrs. Sanders came back, and this time she wasn't alone. Standing behind her was a boy. A boy none of us had ever seen before. He had short dark hair and large eyes that hardly blinked and smooth pale skin. "Everyone," said Mrs. Khan as the boy went and stood next to her, "this is Ahmet, and he'll be joining our class from today. He's just moved to London and is new to the school, so I hope you'll be doing your very best to make him feel very welcome." We all watched in silence as Mrs. Sanders led him to the empty chair. I felt sorry for him because I knew he wouldn't be like sitting next to Clarissa very much. She still missed Dina, and everyone knew she hated boys. She says they're stupid and smell. I think it must be one of the worst things in the world to be new to a place and have to sit with people you don't know, especially people that stare and scowl as you like Clarissa was doing. I made a secret promise to myself right there and then that I would be friends with the new boy. I happened to have some lemon sherbets in my bag that morning, and I thought I would try and give him one at break time. And I would ask Josie and Tom and Michael if they would be his friends too. After all, having 4 new friends would be much better than having none, especially for a boy who looked as scared and as sad as the new one sitting at the back of our class. Chapter 2. The Boy with the Lion Eyes. For the rest of the day, I kept sneaking glances over my shoulder at the new boy and noticed that everyone else was doing the same. Most of the time, he kept his head down low, but every so often I'd catch him staring right back at us. He had the strangest colours eyes I'd ever seen, like a bright ocean, but on a half-sunny day, half-cloudy day. They were grey and silvery blue with specks of gold and brown. They reminded me of a programme I'd saw about lions once. The camera operator had zoomed into a lion's face so much that its eyes had taken up the whole screen. The new boy's eyes were like those lion eyes. They made you want to never stop staring. When Tom joined our class last year, I had stared at him a lot too. I didn't mean to, but I kept imagining that he came from an American spy family, like the ones you see in movies. He told me later that he'd thought that there was something wrong with me. The new boy probably thought that there was something wrong with me too, but it's hard to stop staring at new people, especially when they have eyes like lions. We had geography in first period that morning, so we couldn't get up to say hello to the new boy. Then at break time I looked round the playground for him, but he couldn't be seen anywhere. In second period we had PE, but the new boy didn't join in. He sat in the corner staring at his rucksack, which was red and a black stripe on it, and looked very dirty. I thought he must have forgotten his PE kit because his bag looked empty and saggy. I tried waving at him, but he never looked up. Not even once. Whenever we do PE, I like to pretend that I'm training to join Tintin on an adventure and have to be the super fastest human being on the planet. The only problem is my legs aren't as long as I'd want them to be yet, so even when I jump as hard as I can, I always get stuck in the middle of the vault. Every birthday I make a wish that I grow at least 4 inches taller, and I drink as much milk as I can so that my bones will stretch. But even though I'm 9 3/4 now, I've only grown 1.5 inches since my last birthday. Or at least that's what my mum says. I tried my best to jump over the vault in one go in front of the new boy, but I got stuck again. Luckily, he didn't see me because he was staring at his rucksack the whole time. After PE, we had lunch break, and Josie, Tom, Michael and me decided we would try and find the new boy so that he wasn't all on his own. We waited right next to the playground doors, but the new boy never came out. Tom even went to check the boys' toilets because that's where he had tried to hide on his first day when he didn't know anyone, but there was no one there. "Maybe he's having lunch with the lower grades by mistake," said Josie, but when we got into the lunch hall, we couldn't see him anywhere. In the afternoon we had history, and we were split into groups, but the new boy was allowed to sit on his own and not join in. Mrs. Khan spent more time with him than she did with any of our groups, and she was pointing at things in a new workbook she had gotten him. "Maybe he's deaf," someone whispered. "Maybe he can't speak English," muttered someone else. "There's definitely something wrong with him," whispered everyone. That afternoon, I didn't think any of us learnt about what it was like to be a gladiator living in Roman times, because we were all too busy whispering about the new boy. He must have known what we were doing, because his face was red the whole time. Then at last break, he disappeared again. "He must be inside," said Michael, after we had finished searching the whole playground for the 3rd time in a row. By now, my lemon sherbets were getting sticky in my pocket and beginning to look like bright yellow fuzzballs. At home time, everyone was still talking about the new boy and wondering who he was. I think it was because a whole day had passed and no one knew anything about him except for his name, not even Clarissa, and she had been sitting right next to him. People kept running up to ask her if the new boy had said anything to her, but she just shook her head and said he was using a lower year workbook, so his reading and writing mustn't be very good. On our way to the bus stop, we saw everyone crowding round Jenny, just outside the front gates. Jenny is famous in school for always knowing something about everything, so we ran over to hear what she was saying. Jenny is in the class next door and has the longest hair in school. She likes to spy on people and tell stories about them to other people. Sometimes the stories are true, but most of the time they're only half true because she's making things up. Last year, she told a story about Josie cheating in a football match by pretending to fall down so she could get a penalty kick. But I was there, and so was Tom, and we both saw her fall down after being kicked in the leg by an upper boy called Robert. She had a big fat bruise on her leg, the shape of Australia, for weeks afterwards. But no matter how many times we showed everyone the bruise and told them what really happened, no one believed us, not even the people who were there. Sometimes I think everyone likes to believe a lie, even when they know it's a lie, because it's more exciting than the truth. And they especially like to believe it if it's printed in a newspaper. I know that now. I always know why Mum says politicians are liars and always shouts at them whenever they come on the telly. Maybe Jenny will be a politician when she grows up. When we got closer, we heard Jenny telling everyone that the new boy had spent all his break time with Mrs. Sanders because he had done something bad in his old school and was too dangerous to be let out on the playground with us. But I didn't believe her. I could tell Michael didn't believe her either because he asked her how she knew so much about it. Jenny got angry and crossed her heart and hoped to die that she had heard Mr. Owen telling Miss Timms about outside the teacher's staff room, and that both of them had said how sorry they felt for Mrs. Khan and how glad they were that the new boy wasn't in their class because it wasn't going to be easy to deal with. But before we could ask her any more questions, Jenny's dad began to beep at her from the car, so she ran off. We all watched her go and then looked back through the school gates to see if the new boy had come out, but we couldn't see him anywhere. "He's probably left already," said Josie. Tom and Michael nodded. "Let's just wait 2 more minutes," I said, hoping that he would still be inside. And I was glad I did, because a few seconds later the new boy came out into the playground. He was holding Mrs. Khan's hand and staring at the ground. A woman who was waiting by the outdoor benches suddenly shouted, "Cooey!" and ran over to them. She was wearing a long brown coat, a woolly hat and a bright red scarf. She stood and talked to Mrs. Khan for a long time and nodded an awful lot, but we couldn't hear anything because we were standing too far away. "I wonder if that's his mum," said Josie. "I don't think so, because the new boy didn't hug her at all and seemed shy around her." "Come on," said Michael, who was pointing to his watch, which was beeping like a submarine. Michael has a special watch that tells him when the next bus is coming. It's meant to help him get to places on time, but I've only ever seen it make him bump into things more quickly. "No, wait," I said, and before I could think about it too much, I ran over to where the new boy was standing. "Hello," I said, tapping him on the shoulder. Mrs. Khan and the woman in the red scarf looked down at me as I reached into my pocket and got out the lemon sherbet. "Here," I said, holding it out. I was a little bit embarrassed because by now the sherbet was covered in fluff, but it was still good enough to eat. That's the good thing about lemon sherbets. No matter how bad they look, they will always taste delicious. I think I must have spoken too loudly because the new boy took a step back from me as though he was frightened. "It's all right, Amit. You can take it," said the woman, motioning to him with her hands as if she was speaking in sign language. But the new boy grabbed her hand and hid his face behind her arm. I didn't know what to do because I've never really scared anyone so much before that they've wanted to hide away from me. The woman spoke to him gently again, and after a few seconds he took the sherbet and looked straight at me with his lion eyes before hiding away again. "Thank you," said the woman. She looked at me and gave me a smile. I liked her deep brown eyes because they seemed kind and her bright pink cheeks. But what I liked best of all was how her long blonde hair swirled around in the wind from underneath her hat. Amit would enjoy that on the way home. I nodded and then ran back to where Josie and Tom and Michael were waiting for me. I feel extra happy because Mrs. Khan had smiled with her whole face and had given me a wink too, just like my dad used to whenever he thought I'd done something good or when he was teasing my mum. When I'm a grown-up, I'm going to wink at people just like he used to do and make him feel special too. And as we made our way home, I decided that the next day, whenever I knew the boy was staring at me, I was going to give him just as many winks as I could.